Thank you for joining me this afternoon. My name is Lisa Brown, and I'm the Assistant Director for the New York Employment Services System, NYESS. Today, we're going to talk about strategies to prevent burnout. If you're listening to this presentation for CEU credits for Cornell University, you can apply 2.0 CEU credits. I will go ahead and share my screen so we can get this PowerPoint started. Goodness. There we go. So this, as I mentioned, is strategies to prevent burnout, and this is specifically for work incentive practitioners. So as we talk about this, we want to talk about what is burnout. How do you know if you're experiencing burnout, what those symptoms might be, and your body's reaction to long-term stress. Then, once we've identified those things, we want to talk about what you can do now to help prevent the stress or to lower the burnout symptoms. So we have some strategies we want to talk about, and there are also some OMH mental health and wellness things that we can look at. We also want to address how can we help somebody else? So maybe if you're not experiencing burnout or stressors, maybe you are in a position to help somebody else with this process. So let's talk about that. And then OMH resources that might be available. Hannah, can you see my PowerPoint screen? Thank you. Okay, so when we talk about burnout, what are the things that come to mind? And why is a conversation about burnout such an important thing? Why are we even talking about it today? So as we think about burnout, it can impact you and those people around you. It can impact how you do your job, and it can also impact how other people do their job based on your burnout symptoms. So let's kind of talk about that in a little more detail. So burnout is a significant issue, especially in the social services field. And this is primarily because there are a lot of high caseloads, a lot of demanding work, things that are very complicated in some client specific cases that you come across. We might also be experiencing inadequate resources and consistent employment turnover. So these are all very strong reasons that people experience burnout for a number of reasons, like all of these reasons, but there are many, many more out there. But these are just a few of the things that come up routinely in social services. So one of the questions that I have is, what do you consider to be burnout? And so what we're going to talk about today is just some of those things. If you have additional things you would like to add or you need to talk with someone about burnout, please feel free to do that. 988 is a terrific resource. If you need to talk with someone about what you're experiencing, that would be a terrific resource to go to first. But according to the American Psychological Association and the Dictionary of Psychology, burnout is defined as the physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion accompanied by decreased motivation, lowered performance, and negative attitudes toward oneself and others. So that's a big definition, right? That covers a lot of different things. We're talking about physical exhaustion. We're talking about emotional exhaustion and mental exhaustion. That's a lot. That covers multiple areas of our lives. And then that can create some of the symptoms like a decreased motivation to do your work, motivation to interact with other people, lowered performance. Maybe you're not giving your A game performance anymore. Maybe it's a C game now. Or negative attitudes. Maybe we're being cynical in situations instead of hopeful. But our negative attitudes are toward yourself. Maybe I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job, or toward others in your experiences with customers you serve, or in your coworkers or your supervisors or just the people around you in your office. So it's a lot of things. It can it can encompass a lot of different things. And the thing is, you may not always realize that you've hit burnout until it's too late. When you've crossed the line between, gosh, I'm just really tired tonight, to I'm absolutely too exhausted to function in any way. Alternatively, you might be the type of personality who likes to stay busy, and you might not recognize when you're just doing too much. So that's something as well that you might have to, figure out for yourself, identify for yourself that that is a problem and that's something that you need to address within yourself. But you have to know yourself in order to be able to recognize that. So, burnout is an extended period of stress that feels as though it cannot be improved. And typically, if stress is short-lived or tied to a specific goal, it is most likely not very harmful for you. You know that this is going to pass. You're going to live in this short-term stressful situation, and then it's going to be over, and things will get back to normal, and that will improve the symptoms that you're experiencing. But if the stress feels like it's going to be a never-ending thing, it's just going to hang on forever, and it comes with feelings like emptiness or apathy or hopelessness, it may be indicative of burnout. So again, that's something that you probably have to recognize within yourself and identify that, and then make steps to fix that or to help recognize it, and then search out resources to help you work through that long-term stress. There are different types of burnout associated that we should talk about. So one is employment burnout, and this is just related to the stressors that you have on your job. And then there's non-work burnout, and this is something that a lot of people don't really talk about, but it is really important, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of things going on in our lives. So non-work burnout are just other stressors that you have that are not related to your work. And so we're going to talk about those in just a minute. Non-work burnout is really important to recognize. As I mentioned, we all live in a very busy world right now. We're taking care of ourselves, our families, and then our extended families as well. So jobs are not the only source of a chronic stress that can cause burnout. Parents, partners, non-professional caregivers can also experience endless exhaustion, start feeling overwhelmed by their responsibilities, or secretly believe that they have failed at whatever that role is that they have to fulfill. And these forms of burnout are referred to as parental burnout, if it's involving your children, relationship burnout, if that might be a spouse or a significant other, and caregiver burnout. And that's particularly true if you are taking care of your parents. Maybe you have aging parents, and that's the situation that you find yourself in. So these are really important to know about because they are absolutely a part of the puzzle when we talk about burnout. Non-work burnout is less well known than work burnout that's caused by career stress. And there's a lot of stereotype and stigma associated with non-work burnout, particularly related to parenting, and can make those suffering from non-work related burnout feel like they're to blame for their challenges. And as a result, they often hide their struggles from other people. And burnout in any form can have severe consequences if left untreated. And discussing it openly, either with a spouse, a family member, friends, or even a therapist, is often the first step to addressing the symptoms and getting help and avoiding negative outcomes. So one of the things that's really important to talk about is that stigma that's associated with it. For example, I have aging parents. They're 88 years old. They're in relatively good health, but they have some concerns. And I've been working with them for 2 years at least to get services in place to help them navigate their lives independently as much as they can. But the services that we've gotten in place, now my parents are saying, no, no, we can do it on our own. So all of the work that it took to get that together is now falling apart. And that's really frustrating. So I'm not necessarily saying that I have burnout associated with that, but I can see where that would build up enough over time to create this non-work burnout. And as stigma, we are supposed to be helping our family and our friends and any particular way that we can to help them navigate their systems, however that works. But if we don't, if we are so frustrated that things are not working out and we give up, there's a stereotype or a stigma that you're not helping your parents be successful. And that's something that we need to overcome because that is a really challenging, specific challenging role that people are finding themselves in, especially with our aging population. So that's just one example. And if you have additional examples and you'd like to share those, please reach out and let me know that. It's really important that we support one another in all of these scenarios. So the question that I have is, have you ever felt burnout from a job or a non-work situation? And those are some questions that maybe you should ask yourself and think about if that's true, if you have felt that burnout, how did you react? In what ways did you react? And how long did you let that go on before you were able to get some help or resources for yourself to manage that burnout feeling? So the next section talks about why would I experience burnout? So this training is specifically for certified work incentive practitioners. And in your role, we want to talk about the things that happen to you, the things that you're required to do in your role, and why you might be experiencing burnout. So one of the first things that we talk about is that all SSA beneficiaries, and that includes anyone who has any other public benefit than SSI, so everybody, should have a benefits advisor. They should be able to go to someone who is a certified benefits advisor to get support to help them identify how working will impact those benefits. And so because we're talking about all the people who are on any public benefit, that's a lot of people to serve. And so your individual caseload may be extremely high. And that is a huge reason to have burnout. You're being stretched very thin to accompany all of those people, to help all of those individuals. And it's not just helping Susie with her benefits, but it's also all the things that you do within that role to help Susie with her benefits. You know, the next one talks about data is being shared with an SS beneficiary, and it's expected to be correct, which is a high level of stress. So you have to get it right when you're providing a benefits analysis for somebody, and it's going to talk to them about how their benefits are going to be impacted when they go to work. That's a high level of stress, making sure that you have every I dotted and every T crossed. That could also be a component of burnout. And the last thing on this slide talks about working with Social Security to get what's called a BPQY, the Benefits Planning Query, and other documents that you might need from Social Security, and continuous contact on a variety of subjects with Social Security can be very stressful. So in that particular work incentive practitioner's life, you have a lot of stressors that come together. And if you have high caseloads and you're constantly in contact with Social Security and you have to make sure that everything is correct, that could really impact your ability to do your job routinely in a great way. So it's really important to recognize that you may have a very stressful position. And on top of that, benefits advisement might not be your only job. So you may be an employment specialist at your facility, and work incentive practitioner benefits advisement is just a piece of what you do. And so the work incentive practitioner role is very stressful in and of itself. But then if you're adding your other responsibilities at work, that too can be highly stressful. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword that way. And this kind of speaks to that it might not be your only job and you must fit it in with all of the other things that you're required to do. And your role requires you to also keep all of the data that you have confidential, which may cause you pressure, especially if you're running into people that you're serving and you have to figure out what you're going to tell them on the fly. So if you're out to dinner with your significant other and you run into Susie, who's one of your clients or customers, um, how do you respond to that individual in a polite way, because she is your customer, the person you're serving, but you also have to keep all of that data confidential when you're with your significant other at dinner. So that also can create some stressors for individuals to reply in such a way that it keeps that information confidential. In addition, the work incentive practitioner role requires you to be ethical in all aspects of your responsibilities within this role. And is that stressful? Some people have no difficulty being ethical in every scenario. And we've talked about ethics and our roles and rights and responsibilities as a work incentive practitioner. But when we come down to it, making sure that we are telling the individual, giving the individual information and letting them make their own informed decision instead of us telling them this is what you should do or that's what you should do. So trying to be ethical in every scenario can also cause stress for people. So it's really important to think about that. And I, don't want to belabor the point, but it's just really important to consider all the ways that we can experience burnout and that we may have experienced burnout. And so knowing that we can be ever vigilant in trying to stay on track of or on top of strategies to help us avoid being burnt out as much as possible. So let's consider what the symptoms of burnout are. So if we recognize that we may have a very stressful job or we're experiencing stress through a non-work burnout scenario, if we can recognize what those symptoms are, then we can get a better handle sooner on how to avoid those symptoms. So if we start taking a look at symptoms of burnout, what does that look like? How do you experience burnout? As we talked in our main definition, it can include the emotional, the physical, and the mental exhaustion. And so, what does that look like for someone? So, it's oftentimes persistent fatigue. Maybe it's depression. Maybe you're feeling depressed and isolated from others. And maybe it's self-isolation. So you're not feeling isolated from another person, but you're making yourself isolated. You're not going out to lunch with others. You're not hanging out with your friends. You're staying at home and you're doing your own thing within your own environment. It could look like body aches, just pains and body aches that are really not attributed to any like exercise or over exercise that you've done to those body parts, but you're just feeling achy all over. It could include changes in appetite. Maybe you're eating constantly, or maybe you don't have any interest in eating. So it can be either extreme. It also could include changes in your sleep patterns. So maybe you're sleeping more than ever. Maybe you're getting 9 or 10 or 12 hours of sleep. Maybe you're just getting 1 or 2 hours of sleep and waking up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back to sleep. So there's a lot of different changes in patterns that you can experience. It also could include a weakened immune system. Maybe you're just run down and you feel like you're getting sick. Maybe you have a cold or other cold symptoms that are happening. Maybe you're experiencing some cynicism. You used to be a very positive, hopeful person, and now you feel really cynical about the people you're working with, including coworkers, your supervisor, or even the people that you're serving. Maybe you're seeming to fly off the handle in anger more frequently, or you just find yourself irritated by the people around you, by what people are doing or saying, or you just have that irritable experience, just feeling irritable all the time. Could also include emotional exhaustion. Maybe you come home from work and you just cannot experience one more thing. You just cannot talk to one more person. You're not going to answer the phone. You're not going to get your mail. You don't want to experience any connection with another person. And maybe it's a reduced sense of accomplishment. Maybe you feel like I am not doing a good job. I'm not making any progress. This is bad. I don't want to do this anymore. And you just feel at a loss for what to do and how to do it. And you're just not excited about your job anymore. It's just being routine and negative, and it just does not fit what you want to do for the rest of your life. So symptoms of burnout can just be all kinds of things that we experience. And you can have one of these symptoms, or you can have multiple symptoms. It really is an individual situation. And these symptoms, if we're talking about burnout, are not just felt one time, but on a long-term basis. So like me, I have a busy day at work, and when I get home, I might be mentally fatigued and sit on the couch and watch TV the rest of the evening. Just because I'm tired, that was a really busy day. But what symptoms of burnout really imply is that this is a busy week, a busy month, a busy year, and every day you are mentally and physically fatigued, and you sit on the couch and you don't move until bedtime. And so it's a long-term, ongoing feeling of being burned out. And some of the other symptoms that can occur would be a sense of dread about going to work. And I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but if like I forget what they call it, it's a Sunday evening feeling that, maybe I'll call in sick tomorrow. I don't think I want to go to work tomorrow. This just does not feel right. I don't want to do it. So it's a dread about going to work. And in helping professions, especially doctors, they may notice a dwindling compassion towards the people in their care. So they may just not care about what's happening with someone in their care. And it could be feeling like you can no longer do your job effectively. That might also signal burnout. Now, one of the things I want to share about this is a sense of dread about work. I actually love my job at this point. This is a great job for me. But there was a time years ago that I had a job that I dreaded going to work. And the reason for that is because the supervisor asked me to do things that did not fit with my value system. And after a period of time, I could not do it anymore. And I quit my job. And I felt so much better after having done that. But it was about how much I could take. And then at the point I could not take it any longer, I had to do something about it. But I dreaded that Sunday night feeling about I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I absolutely had that. So it's really important that you recognize it when you see it, that this is what's happening and why, and then figure out what you do from there. What is your experience? What you should do next. So again, if you've experienced any of these symptoms or have any examples, please feel free to share those. You're absolutely welcome to reach out and we can discuss that information and talk about that. The next situation or section is about your body's reaction to long-term stress. So that's something that's important to know, because if you're in a position that you're feeling this stress and you're feeling like burnout, physical, emotional, mental, what is the long-term reaction? How does your body react to that long-term stress? So one of the things that's important to know is that the body's stress response system is usually self-limiting. And once a perceived threat has passed, hormones return to typical levels. So everything goes back to normal. And as adrenaline and cortisol levels drop, your heart rate and blood pressure return to typical levels, and other symptoms go back to the regular activities. So you experience a stressor, things are on high alert, and then once that stressor has gone away, things can go back to the typical levels that it would have before. However, when stressors are always present and you always feel like you're under attack, that fight or flight reaction can stay turned on. And the long-term activation of the stress response system and too much exposure to cortisol and other stress hormones can disrupt almost all of the body's processes. And that is a huge, or it can be a huge problem for your overall well-being. And so this puts you at a higher risk of many health problems. And these are just some of the examples of that. Long-term stress that is not being recognized or taken care of can lead to anxiety, depression, digestive problems, headaches, muscle tension and pain. It can also lead to heart disease, having a heart attack, high blood pressure, and even lead to stroke symptoms. It can cause sleep problems, weight gain, and also weight loss, and problems with your memory and focus. So there's a lot of negative things that can happen if someone is experiencing long-term stress. So as soon as you can recognize that you're having these burnout symptoms and then do something about that, put strategies in place to help you get through those or make a change in your lifestyle, that is the best course of action, making sure that we identify it right away and make changes so that we don't get to this long-term stress and the effects that it could cause. And what do you do if you're experiencing these long-term stressors? See your doctor immediately. Call 988, 911, make an appointment with your doctor. See if you can reach out to someone and get assistance to help you manage those stressors or any of those diagnoses from the previous page. So it's really important we can recognize it and we can follow up with someone that we can trust and that we can get support from. So the question is, right now, if you're experiencing any of these feelings of burnout or stress, high stress levels, what can you do right now today? What are those things, those strategies that you can put in place? So what we want to do is think about it. Let's brainstorm some ideas, come up with some ideas, and then put them in place for ourselves. So one of the biggest things, and people talk about this all the time, I'm going to improve my work-life balance. Well, what does that mean? So it's really a general term that sometimes we don't get down to the nitty-gritty as to what that could mean for somebody. So work-life balance is making sure that you are doing the best work you can while you're at work, but when you're not at work, that you are living your life to the best that you can outside of work. And so making sure that those two sections don't overlap, or at least overlap in a large way. So one of the ways to do that would be adjusting your work hours or your location. So oftentimes people can work full-time or even part-time. You could ask to work part-time if it's just too stressful. You may be able to work at a different location, like a remote working situation. You might be able to outsource or delegate or share responsibilities when possible. If there are multiple work incentive practitioners within your agency, and one of them might be the person who connects with Social Security all the time to get all of the BPQYs from Social Security, and that's their job. You can delegate some of that information to that person, and they will handle that connection with Social Security while you work on something else for your clients and their clients as well. You may be able to share those responsibilities if possible. It's also important to set those clear boundaries between work and life. And one of those things would be don't checking your work email during your off hours. Once you get home from work, you are on your own time. And following up with email just blends that. It takes away that boundary. And so then you feel like you're always working, or maybe you're always on call. And so it's really important that we separate that. And then practicing self-care is really important. And that can mean a lot of different things for people. If I have a candle and it's a vanilla candle, that makes me relax. Some people might have a glass of wine. Some people might go out and exercise. Somebody might have a bubble bath. So whatever works for you in your self-care, that's what's really important, is to make sure that that works and that you're doing it on a regular basis. And then it says allow for adequate downtime. So that means that in our busy lives, we typically go, 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 until we collapse in bed at night and go to sleep and start all over the next day. And so what this means is allowing for downtime. When you get home from work, maybe give yourself a half an hour of peace and quiet. Let the kids go out and play while you're doing nothing. Just, sit and be with yourself. And then you can get up and do what you need to do for your family. But making sure that you have adequate downtime for yourself and actually planning that within your day. So that's really important to think about how that work-life balance can actually work for you. It's also important to think about boundaries. And with boundaries, I mean family boundaries, I mean work boundaries with coworkers or supervisor boundaries. Whatever kind of boundaries are not in place yet, thinking about how you can make better boundaries with people. So it's okay to be able to say no to new tasks to help reduce your workload. Your supervisor says, I would like for you to do this. I want you to attend this meeting, or I want you to supervise these 3 new people. It's okay to have the conversation that says, I am really at my level right now, and I cannot take on any new job tasks. Can we talk about how we can ease into it, or maybe somebody else can step up and attend that meeting on your behalf? So it's really okay to say no, or I'm really at my limit right now. I cannot do one more thing successfully because I need to handle what I'm currently handling. You may also schedule regular breaks throughout the day. So making sure that you take care of yourself. One of the things that I've been doing is taking 5 minutes to run down the stairs and come back up the stairs. We are on the 6th floor, and it really only takes 5 minutes it takes, 2 minutes to fly down the stairs, but it takes longer to come up the stairs. But that's just a 5-minute break during my workday. And I try to do that twice a day, which really helps break up the activities that I'm doing during the day. And it gives me a minute to think about other things or do something else or step away from things that are really stressful. So that's really helpful. Also, start and stop times should be specific. So I work from 7:30 to 3:30, and I get to work at, 7:15. So that allows me a few minutes to get things together, get my tea or my coffee, sit down, open up my computer, and then get started at 7:30. But then at 3:30, I need to be able to close the computer and go home. So it's really important. I mean, sometimes there's an emergency, right? And you have to stay and you have to finish something. And so that happens from time to time, but it should not be a regular thing. You should be able to close the computer and go home at your allotted time. So it's really important to be mindful of that. And then minimize multitasking. So another consideration is we think that multitasking is a really good time management technique, but it really is not. It takes away from the focus of one project at a time. And if we can minimize multitasking, we are less scattered amongst several projects and focusing on one project at a time. So that also can help create less stress if we're just managing one thing at a time. Sometimes we can't do that. I totally understand. But if we could try to minimize that multitasking, that could be important in the future for your stress level. Sometimes people say, well, should I quit my job? And the answer to that might be maybe. Maybe if it's too stressful, if it's something that you're dreading about on Sunday night, going to work on Monday, then maybe that is an option. And in my case, with that particular job I was telling you about, I could only do that for a period of time, and then I had to leave. It was not worth my anxiety for my supervisor to keep asking me to do something that was not within my value system. And so it was appropriate for me to leave. But a couple of things that you can do before you think about quitting your job is speaking up about your concerns. So go to your supervisor, talk to them about the stressors that you're experiencing at work. Talk with them about the things that you have in place already that you're trying, the strategies that you're trying already to be able to handle the stressors. Or maybe you need a vacation. Maybe you need to talk to human resources about any accommodations that you might need at work. There are a lot of different options. So speaking up about your concerns can help everybody understand better what's going on. So one of the things that comes up sometimes is, well, I don't want to talk to my supervisor because then they'll think that I'm not doing my job well, or I can't handle my job. And so that could be a real concern for people. But if you're able to verbalize what's happening and you have a list of all the things that you're doing and you're juggling all of these different projects at the same time, but you need some assistance at this point to manage it all, that should be a reasonable concern to talk about with your supervisor and open that conversation. So they may not be excited about that prospect of sharing some of the work duties for a while, but it's an option that you have to be able to open that dialogue with your supervisor. You may also, in that conversation, talk about restructuring your work environment. So thinking about what will actually help you in this place. So coming to your supervisor with strategies to help. So this is where I'm feeling overwhelmed, but I think that if I can do this, this, and this, I'll be able to manage this better. And so coming at it from a conversational tone with the supervisor, and instead of just feeling overwhelmed with no scenarios or no strategies to fall back on. So removing the clutter from your desk, that might be one of the best ways to get rid of all the stuff that makes you feel overwhelmed, and helping you get organized. Being more organized is also a time saver, which then can also reduce some of the stress that you might be feeling. It's also important to start nurturing your relationships. So any family or friends that you have that maybe you haven't connected with them in a long time, but it feels like it's time to do that again, or you're feeling isolated, so you want to pick up those relationships and move forward with them, that's a good time to do that. Because not only does that give you another person of support, but you can talk with other people about how you're feeling and then experience what they're feeling and share that connection and share maybe how to manage or better manage the stressors that you're experiencing and how to strategize together on burnout symptoms and how to help get through those symptoms. So nurturing your relationships is a really important task as well. We talked about self-care habits, and so that can be anything that you feel helps you cope better. And it's really a good idea to take a look at one or two habits that can be started quickly. Once you get into a habit, and I think it takes, 4 to 6 weeks to establish a specific habit, but making it a part of your weekly habit or daily, depending on what that might be, that's really a good idea to start thinking about one or two things that you can do to make you feel better about what's happening, and then continue to do them on an ongoing basis. You also might consider focusing on hobbies that you have outside of work. So get it reconnected to your old healthy habits and hobbies that you had, or develop some new healthy hobbies. So, long time ago, I used to do cross stitch, and it's because I had all the time to do it. Now I don't have any time to do it. But the reason I don't have any time is because I don't make time to do it. So one of the things that we have to recognize is that we make time for those things that are most important for us. And it's a good idea to recognize that you are the most important thing. And if cross stitching makes you happy, and that's going to help you with the stressors that you're feeling and the burnout that you're feeling, then you should do it. And you need to make time for yourself in order to make that happen. You also could take a look at healthy hobbies that are brand new, something you've never done before, maybe taking a class at the community college, or learning how to, ride your bike, long distance bike riding, or swimming, or some other activities that get you involved, maybe within your community, or even if it's a solo activity, doing it yourself. In addition, it's a good idea to talk to somebody about it. So whatever you're feeling, burnout or stressors on your job, doctor's appointments are really a good time to start talking about how you're feeling. Family, friends, and other important people, maybe your pastor at church or the membership person at some club that you belong to. Anybody that you feel that you can trust and that will be supportive of you is a good idea to reach out and start talking to people, because you are not the only one. Even though it feels like it sometimes that you are in the process of burnout and all these stressors are adding up on top of you, you're not the only one that feels that way. And so being able to share that information with others can help other people also talk about what's happening in their lives. So reaching out is really a good idea. So these are just some things to consider when we're talking about burnout or thinking about changing jobs or thinking about the stressors and the things that you want, because we all have stress, right? Regular stress, but we all have significant stress too. So things that you are drawing the line at when you're thinking about your job or you're thinking about burnout situations. So if there's a significant disconnect between your current work situation and your needs, goals, or overall well-being, that's something to consider. If you have a lack of passion for your work, maybe you started out loving what you do and now there's just so many different job tasks associated with it, it's stressful for you and you've lost your passion. Maybe the organization shows a lack of growth and learning, and so you're not being challenged at work. Maybe your situation or your role is not a challenging environment for you anymore. And what could you do to make that challenging? You could start a new project, you could increase your role or ask for additional resources or take a class. Take a class at work. You know, LinkedIn Learning offers a lot of different training opportunities for people. Maybe if you decide that you want to take a time management class and talk to your boss about that, that will help, or other classes that you might be interested in. Something to consider is whether it's a toxic work environment. A lot of drama involved in a work environment can be very stressful on someone who's doing a good job at work, at their work duties, but it just is overall too stressful in the environment. Could be a loss of interest or passion, unfavorable work-life balance, and that can be fixed. We can all work toward better work-life balance. Maybe the position doesn't offer compensation or benefits that you need in order to be successful. That also could be arranged through human resources. You may be able to talk to someone about that within your environment. Could be a lack of alignment with company values. Maybe they're going in a direction that you're just not willing to go, or financial instability of the company. That can be very stressful for all employees. Maybe there are better opportunities available someplace else. Maybe you're feeling unmotivated or unhappy at work, and then that dread of going to work, that Sunday night feeling of, I don't want to do this, I'm going to call in sick. So these are all things to consider when you're thinking about your job, the role that you have in the agency that you work at right now. And a lot of these things can be fixed. So if you like your job, if you enjoy the responsibilities that you have, but you're experiencing some of these other things at work, the first thing to do would be to talk with your supervisor about your feelings. Let them know what's happening in your world. Let them know how these things are impacting your ability to work, and see if you can work together to make a change within your work environment. And that could be a huge plus and make everyone's work environment better in the long run. And then you were the proponent of that. You were the person who started that process. So that's a really important thing, is if it's worth saving, absolutely talk to your supervisor about saving it. And as we talk further about a work incentive practitioner and the things that you do on your job, actually working with customers to help them gain the information they need in order to go to work and understand how their working will impact those benefits. So you may be working with a person who absolutely wants to work off of all benefits and is really happy to do that. And then have others that may really want to hang on to the benefit as long as possible because they're scared about what happens when they go to work. They may lose their public benefits, they may lose their healthcare coverage, and that's scary for people. So you have a terrific role in helping someone better understand this process and making them successful, helping them become successful employees in the workforce. And it's a great responsibility. And so as we go through learning about strategies to prevent burnout, um, these are things to consider, that you do have a great responsibility in your role and all the other roles that you play, of course. Um, and so it's important to consider what you can do to prevent burnout so that you can keep doing this terrific work that you're doing. So one of the things that people experience is to develop a sense of purpose, and that helps counter the burnout symptoms that you might be experiencing. And this is a sense of purpose is something that will have an impact on others. And I don't know of a greater role than a work incentive practitioner to have an impact on other people. So it's something that you uniquely in your role can focus on, that you are really helping people develop an understanding of how working will impact their benefits and helping them become successful employees within the workforce. That's a big deal. So it's a great role and it's a great responsibility, but it has a high impact on what other people are doing. In addition, something to make you feel as if you're making the world a better place. So doing things in your role that can make the world a better place, right? If you're helping somebody get a job, if you're the employment specialist, you're helping them get a job. That is a huge difference in that one person's life, which then could impact other people's lives. It's kind of goes down a string. If you help one person and they help someone and the next person and so on. If you help one person, it could make the world a better place. Also, meaningfulness can counteract the negative aspects of a job. If you can find meaning within your work, that is huge, not only for you, but the people that you're serving, that there is meaning, powerful meaning. And then other motivators include autonomy, as well as a good hard challenge. So being able to work independently, knowing that you know how to do your job and you do it well, and a challenge. You know that some of those benefits advisement questions are really challenging, very involved, and it's going to take a lot of research to figure it out. That could be really meaningful for you if that's the type of person that you are that really enjoys that challenge. So a work incentive practitioner job can meet all of these strategies. It can absolutely cover all of these. But it's what it implies to you. Does that apply to you in your situation? But that in and of itself can prevent burnout, having a job that makes an impact, that you know you're making the world a better place, and that you can counteract the negative aspects of the job. Self-care, again, is very effective in fighting against burnout. And I would just recommend that you schedule it regularly in your daily calendar or your weekly calendar, however you want to arrange it, but making sure that you set aside specific time for that self-care. The recommendation is that you would add like lunch to your daily calendar or a doctor's appointment to your calendar. You would add self-care. So whether that means, meditation or yoga or, reading a book or lighting a candle, whatever is important to you, that should be established in your regular calendar, your regular schedule. And talking a little bit more about self-care, we already talked that it's different for everybody, but some of the common strategies might be yoga. And there's options for you to join a class, go to the YMCA and participate in a class, or you can practice at home all by yourself, or there's chair yoga now. You can do yoga online while somebody else is doing it and showing you how to do it. You could do it within your home. There's just all kinds of things that you can do nowadays. And yoga is just one example. There's mindfulness meditation, which is mental training practice that teaches you to slow down your racing thoughts, let go of all of the negativity, and calm both your mind and your body. Be fully focused on the now so that you can acknowledge and accept your thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment. So that's another area that is huge for people. Mindfulness, meditation, thinking about letting go, slowing down your thoughts, and calming your mind and your body. These are just some other examples of self-care. We've kind of talked about them already, but you have to use what's important to you and what would help you feel better. So some examples would be massage, going to a massage therapist, exercise, getting up routinely to walk and stretch at the office, or having a workout routine first thing in the morning, or going to the Y or the gym after work, and just getting away from your desk for a couple minutes. So a lot of different ways that you can exercise. There are also some dietary changes, maybe paying better attention to the food that you're eating and making it more healthy. Practicing self-compassion. So one of the things that we don't do typically is give ourselves a break. And so it might be one of those things that we consider that, you worked really hard on this particular project and you're very stressed out about it, but you have to give yourself a break because you did work very hard on it and it shows. You did a great job. And so a little pat on the back or giving yourself a break is really important. And then prioritizing sleep and making sure that you get enough sleep to feel rested. So there were some studies long ago about not everybody needs an 8-hour worth of sleep. And that's true. Everybody has varying degrees of what they need to be restful. But finding out what that is for you and then making sure that you get that amount of sleep. So if I go to bed at 10 o'clock and I wake up at 6, I'm a little bit more tired in the morning. But if I head to bed about 9:30 and get up at 6 o'clock, I'm usually more well rested. So that's how it works for me. But again, it depends on how it works for you. Finding out what that means to you is going to be really important for your self-care. And then these are just some other general things that you might be able to do in addition to other things on our list. So picking one or two of these types of activities can be important for your self-care. So keeping a journal, writing about those stressful things at work, writing about the things that are non-work related, your family situation, elderly parents and the services that you've tried to put in place for them. Any of those kinds of things, keeping track of that, writing a journal, letting go of those things by writing it down. Taking time for the hobbies that you have, fostering healthy relationships, reaching out to people, making new friends, maybe adding a sense of humor. And, one of the things in our lives that's really important is laughter. And we sometimes don't get enough of it. We live in a serious world sometimes. And that's one of those things that I need to add to my life, more laughter, more humor. You could also take some time to volunteer within your community. Any services that are near and dear to your heart, you might volunteer for them. Taking a vacation. If you have time off, if you have schedule accrual time that you can take, making sure that you take a vacation. And while you're on vacation, you have no access to the email or the voicemail while you're gone. Making sure that there is a boundary there so that you can experience relaxation on vacation. And then scheduling regular time off. So I know people that have over 200 hours of vacation time and they're not taking any time off. And I can't imagine how that works for them. I like to take a regularly scheduled vacation. I take one major vacation a year and then maybe long weekends sometimes or short little trips periodically throughout the rest of the year. But it's really important to do that, to make sure that you're taking time for yourself. And again, when you do that, when you have regular time off, don't check your email and don't check your phone, your voicemails. They'll be there when you get back. And it's all a part of the job when you're back at work. But when you're on your own time, on your vacation time, that should be about you and your vacation. So keeping track of yourself can include scheduling time for you. And then talking to somebody that you trust, and there is no shame in asking for help. And we talked about stigma and stereotypes. If we're having difficulty and we throw up our hands and we say, well, I'm no longer going to help my parents with this because they're not receptive to getting help. And I've done all I can do and I'm not doing anything else. That's a very frustrating scenario to experience. But if you're able to talk to somebody about that, that can lessen the stress for you. And it can also then dispel the stereotype or the shame that you're not helping your family, that you've tried to do that and it's not working. So you're going to take a step back and maybe you're going to rethink it and take a different approach in the future. But if you're able to talk to somebody about it, they can help you brainstorm what wasn't working and how maybe you can try a different approach to try something new. So reaching out to a friend, maybe your partner, your spouse, significant other, a therapist, or even your supervisor or an HR. Those individuals can help you in various scenarios. So one of the questions is thinking about what strategies do you have to prevent burnout? And so what I'd like you to do is think about that. What strategies do I already have in place that when I start experiencing this burnout symptom, I can fix it? I can start here and move forward. So that's really important to have a list of things. So if you're not experiencing burnout right now, that's terrific. That's great. But knowing what you would do once you start experiencing it is a good idea. Having strategies in place. And maybe even if you're not experiencing burnout right now, but you putting into place self-care. So I'm going to do these couple of things for self-care to prevent me even getting burnout symptoms. And then, that's already in place. You don't have to worry about that in the future when you just can't do it anymore. So that's a good idea to think about a strategy that you don't have yet, but you'd like to put in place to prevent burnout from happening. This next section talks about OMH, so the Office of Mental Health, and we're talking about mental health and wellness strategies. So my question here is, what websites do you use to gather information about mental health topics? So it's really important that the information that you're getting is from a source that is factual and absolutely current on the information. So we wouldn't want you to go, like our example typically with mental health would be going to the Office of Mental Health website to look at their information versus going to the magazine Psychology Today or Good Housekeeping magazine. Those are not going to cover the real facts about mental health issues or mental health topics that you might want to know. So using a reliable, valid source of information is way more important than just picking up a magazine and leafing through it to see what's out there. So when we're researching information about mental health and wellness, it's important to use a reputable website or publications. So New York State Office of Mental Health, the website, the peer-reviewed journals, state psychiatric associations, and mental health organizations, like National Alliance on Mental Illness being one of them. And these are some of the links to those organizations that I talked about. So the New York State Office of Mental Health Association in New York, the Mental Health First Aid, Mental Health Coalition, and the National Alliance on Mental Health. So a couple of things. So the OMH website has some information about, and there's a public resources / publications. We'll get you to this page. So Be Well is your wellness in your way. So Be Well is here to help all New Yorkers learn about mental health topics like wellness, resilience, stress, and trauma. And the website offers tips and strategies to support your mental wellness and navigate tough times if you're going through them. So this is a link that you absolutely can use to click on it to get to Be Well. And that website will be able to help you with some strategies to support mental wellness. And then there are some links on that Be Well page. So how to take care of yourself, things to consider, tips for mental wellness, tips for overall wellness, and how to continue your wellness journey. In addition, there's some things on there that are for support for your resilience. So resiliency tips, how to stay in the moment or mindfulness, and then continuing your wellness journey. So what does that look like over time? Being resilient is sometimes a difficult thing to be, but these will be able to give you, this page will be able to give you some tips on how to be resilient in your future. There are also some tips on how to calm yourself. And it specifically talks about centering yourself, distracting yourself, connecting to yourself, and continuing your wellness journey. There are some options for getting through some tough times. So it talks about stress and trauma. And so these are also really important resources that you can rely on to help you get through whatever situations you're struggling with. And these are some of the mental health tips for mental wellness. Set a plan for your day. So oftentimes, we'll set a plan. Today I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you get to work and all of that goes out the window, right? Because there's a phone call that you have to take care of and it redirects your entire day. But if we can have a plan put in place for the beginning of your day, oftentimes that helps us stay centered on what we're doing and focused on how we should accomplish our day or what we should do during the day to accomplish what we need to. It's also a good idea to practice deep breathing and relaxation techniques to help you center yourself from being frazzled or pulled in a million directions. And then another consideration is recharging yourself by disconnecting from your devices. So oftentimes we are attached to our phones and, we have I don't know if you have this, but on my phone, I have a screen timer that tells me how much time I spend per day on my phone. And that can be really eye-opening when you take a look at that. And if the less time you spend on your phone can help you recharge your batteries for yourself, making sure that you are able to step away from it and take care of what you need to, aside from all of the things that we can find online, on YouTube, in the news, all the stuff, social media, all that stuff. Disconnect from it. Then taking a step back when in a stressful situation. So one of the things that we can look at is if something is happening, we can step aside and evaluate it. And then based on our evaluation, make a reasonable reaction, come to it with a different reaction, perhaps in a different way, because we've been able to step back and look at it in a logical, realistic way. Then we may also take a look at trying something creative. So writing in your journal or writing art classes or writing a book or articles or whatever type of thing you'd like to do creatively, that could be really important for your well-being. Attending a social event, something that's important to you, maybe in a specific population like the veterans, maybe attending a social event that honors the veterans or whatever type of population that's important to you or a passion for you, attending that event and being with like-minded people about the passions that you have. And then maybe at the end of the day, reflecting on your day, taking a look at what you did and what was good and maybe what was stressful and maybe how to fix that for tomorrow. Or how to respond differently in a stressful situation. So reflecting on what went well and maybe reflecting on what could be better the next day. Again, sleeping well, making sure that you're getting enough sleep to make you feel well rested in the morning, making healthy food choices, exercising, moving your body, even if it's just a few minutes away from your desk, or maybe it's a walk around the block after work. Getting outside, experiencing the fresh air, and scheduling a health screening, making sure that you're going to regular doctor's appointments or otherwise taking a look at decreasing symptoms that you might have by seeing a physician or going to your primary care doctor. Some resiliency tips include focusing on what you can control. So we cannot control every aspect of our lives and every situation that pops up. So if you can step away from the situation and focus on the part of that situation that you can control and the others that you cannot, then that's important. That could be an important distinction. And remember what you do well. So sometimes we are flooded by, you didn't do this well, excuse me. But remember what you can do well and what you do well in your job. And maybe make goals for yourself. Identify a couple of things that you would like to accomplish this year or this week or this month. Maybe you'd like to take a class. Maybe you would like to learn a new skill. Any of those things are really important. Maybe it's related to your work, and maybe it's a personal goal that you have. And then find your reason. Find the passion, the thing that it's important to you, and do what you're doing because it's important in that realm. Also, making sure that you're including others, getting the support that you need from other people around you, and use mistakes as a chance to learn. The thing that we have to get over is that nobody is perfect. Not any one of us is perfect. And so we are all going to make mistakes, but that gives us a chance to improve. And so if we can do that, if we can turn it around and actually improve, that's a very useful thing. We also need to recognize that it's okay to feel the emotions that we feel. So sometimes, we have this experience where we're angry, but we've been told you cannot be angry, cannot show your anger about something. But we have to recognize that it's okay to feel your emotions. If you feel angry, it's okay to feel angry, but it's what you do about that that matters. So it's all right to feel happy and sad and angry and frustrated and elated and content and peaceful. It's totally okay. We just have to remember to feel those emotions. And then nurture your spirituality. If that's important to you, make sure that that is happening, that you're nurturing that feeling. So one of the questions here is, what have you tried of any of these suggestions? And if you have, how has that worked for you? So thinking about that and maybe trying something new that you've never tried before, but try it and see how it works. This next section talks about how can I help someone else? So maybe at this point in time, you are not feeling burnt out. You're not feeling any of these symptoms. You don't have any need for additional support in this area for yourself. But you recognize that someone that is close to you is experiencing these symptoms. So it can be painful to watch someone struggle with burnout, especially because it's rarely possible for you to address the root causes yourself. There's nothing that you can do inherently to fix that problem, but you can practice helping other people, and you can practice empathetic listening. So being that support person for someone else and listening to what's happening, helping them take a look at logical reasoning might be important, but actually the listening part is the most important because sometimes people just need to be heard. And then encouraging self-care, making sure that individuals are taking care of themselves on a regular basis is a good idea. And then offer help with tasks outside of work. So if you're a friend of the family and you're helping someone, maybe you're going to babysit their kids for a half an hour so that they can have a half an hour of peace and quiet to themselves. That could be really important for them. And it's a half an hour of time that you're taking away from your schedule, but that helps that individual with recentering themselves and becoming able to handle that situation better just because they've had that little bit of self-care for them. This next section is just about resources. And so I wanted to include this information because There's a lot of resources available through OMH, the Office of Mental Health, and we talked about some of them in the presentation earlier, but I wanted to include them because I think that they are a great resource, not only for you, but also resources to share with other people. So if you know people who have stressful situations or are experiencing burnout or have some difficulties in certain areas that could use some support, these might be helpful for them. So we have just our resources publication section, stress management and resiliency. So self-care at work, stress management for students, resiliency tips for New Yorkers, mental wellness in the winter months. Sometimes it becomes really apparent that people struggle with depression in the wintertime. And that could be really difficult for people, along with stress at work, creating the burnout situations. So winter blues is what they're calling it here, but taking a look at how to take care of yourself in the winter because of scenarios that you find yourself in with depressive symptoms. Self-care for frontline workers. So learn about the impact of racism has on your mental health and how to cope with racism and racial trauma. Then social media shareables, coping tips and crisis resources for you to use and share. Social media can be very stressful. Individuals sometimes feel a less responsibility because they're not looking at someone one-on-one. They're just responding to something that they don't have any, they're not seeing whose response, who they're talking to in person. And so it can really turn into a bad situation. People are not very friendly or or they're very negative on social media without thinking about it. There's also coping with grief. Grief can be a huge obstacle for individuals, and this gives individuals some resources on how to cope with specific grief and knowing that our grief process is different for everybody. So making sure that you recognize that not everybody goes through the same grief stages at the same time or same time frame. Everybody is unique in that situation. There's also stress management tips for the holidays, and oftentimes holidays are the most stressful periods because of the family and the friends and the stressors at work, and all the scenarios come together at once and create that stress. Breathing exercises for everyone. Then there's breathing exercises for kids. And make no mistake, kids also experience stressful situations. It's important that we consider or support individuals who are going through it, regardless of age. This is the final slide, and it is information about how to contact NYESS. So again, I am Lisa Brown, the NYESS Assistant Director through the Office of Mental Health. If you have any questions or concerns, or you're experiencing burnout and you'd like to talk with someone, one of the other options is using the 988 that we mentioned earlier. That is a resource that is a nationwide resource for individuals who are needing support. They need to talk to somebody, they need a resource. Absolutely contact 988. They would be a great resource. Thank you for joining me today. This recorded message presentation is going to live on our YouTube channel, and this will be available for viewing at a later date. If you have any questions about anything or you'd like to reach out, please feel free to do that. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a good afternoon.